And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather is showing rain moving into the southeast coast, continuing from the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise mostly cloudy with some scattered showers over the remainder of southern Alaska. Also up across the eastern Alaska Range, Copper River Basin into the 40-mile country. Quiet evening overnight period here for the central part of the state as well as the northern Bering Sea. Chance of snow showers or flurries for the areas of the Arctic coast and North Slope. This system moving eastward will just graze the Alaska Peninsula on Sunday as a front washes out here all across the Panhandle. Cloudy, wet, and cool over the southeast part of the state here, and still some flurries on the Arctic coast. This system takes off to the northeast and brings increasing wind and rain in across all the Panhandle, at least the eastern North Gulf Coast. On Monday, as high pressure develops ahead of the next big storm coming into the northwest Bering Sea, that's going to make for light winds and dry conditions here as sunshine increases from the Seward Peninsula down across the Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta, and eventually into the Aleutians. For the coastal water forecasts for tonight, along the coast, winds mostly south at 15 knots with seas around 10 feet. Clarence Strait, southeast at 20, south 20 for Stevens Passage, 4-foot seas, and southeast 15 for Lynn Canal, seas at 3 feet. And then we get a little bit of an increase in the winds here with that next storm coming in on Monday. For the south coast, there'll be southerly 20 to 25 knots, south to southeast winds 25 knots for the central coast, east at 20 for the north coast. Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots with 4-foot seas, and south winds at 20 knots for Stevens Passage, south at 15 for Lynn Canal. Prince William Sound, east winds at 10 knots, seas around 2 feet, light variable winds for the North Gulf Coast. And for the Barren Islands, west winds 20 knots, 15 out of the west for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 4-foot seas. And 15-knot winds out of the southwest or northwest for Cook Inlet on Monday, northwest 15 for Kamishak Bay. And for the Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, looking at north winds at 20 knots, 20-knot winds for the eastern North Gulf Coast out of the east and northeast. Prince William Sound, winds will be northeast at 15 knots, seas at about 3 feet. Kodiak Island, not too bad tomorrow wind-wise, west-southwest winds 15 knots, 4 to 7-foot seas. And for the Alaska Peninsula, variable winds 10 to 15 knots, southwest 15 for Bristol Bay. And the outlook for Monday for the Alaska Peninsula, north winds 15 to 25 knots, otherwise west at 10 for Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island north at 15. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, north to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, and we've got 25-knot winds here from Atka Island westward to Amchitka, and then Kiskadashimia, those winds still north but down to 15 to 20 knots. And they increase with that warm front pushing in from the west here from Kiskadashimia. Look for winds out of the south and southwest at 30 knots with seas building 8 to 10 feet. West at 20 for Amchitka Peninsula, Amchitka Island. And for the Adak-Atka area, northwest winds 25 knots, seas 7 to 8 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, north winds 25 knots with seas running 6 to 8 feet. Southwest coast for Sunday, as well as St. Lawrence Island, all northerly at 20 knots with seas running 2 to 4 feet. Norton Sound, small craft advisories north of 25 there. North 15 for St. Matthew Island. North 20 for the Pribilofs. And those winds for St. Paul and St. George on Monday, about 15 knots from the north, seas 5 feet. West 15, seas 4 feet for St. Matthew Island. Kuskokwim Delta Coast, west at 20, seas only 2 feet. And for the Yukon Delta Coast, St. Lawrence Island, northwest winds 15 knots, west at 15 for Norton Sound. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for tomorrow, light winds out of the north, barely a breeze at 5 knots, southeast 10 knots for the central coast, west at 10 on the western Arctic coast. And for the Chukchi Sea, north winds 15 to 20 knots. And then for the day on Monday, light winds all across the Arctic coast. About 5 knots for mostly a northerly direction for the Chukchi Sea. West-northwest winds at about 15 knots.